I'm
phenomenal.
so happy to have you on today and to be able to share in conversation with you about your journey and what's
Thank
exciting
you.
for you and what's been challenging. And we're going to go there. And I'm really excited to hear just what's going on in your world, even if it's just regular, I'm just living in Portugal. That's kind of
Yeah.
cool. Amazing. Hello.
Amazing. It's such an honor to have been invited. Thank you for reaching out. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. My pleasure. You were one of the first people I thought of. And then when I saw your podcast, really, I was like, ooh, that's a cool podcast. Then I started to look around and see what you're up to and realize that you actually, I know you're always all over the world somewhere, which is fun.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize that you were like looking to actually settle for a time in Portugal.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time for all of us like world travelers. I've actually seen quite a few people in my network or in my like sphere who have been looking at like settling. And I think there's like this interesting situation that happens when, I think you likely experience this too, when you're creating your life around so much travel, you like voluntarily create uncertainty because you want like, experiences that push you outside of your comfort zone. But when so much of the world is in uncertainty all the time, it can become very like energetically challenging to balance, the uncertainty that you want to create to push yourself out of your comfort zone, and then the uncertainty that just exists in the world right now. So I think creating some certainty to just like ground out is something quite a few of us now are looking to do.
Wow, that was a great little soundbite right there. I love that, especially for the people that follow me. So just a little backstory. You probably know I'm an international keynote speaker, so I speak all around the world, mostly in the US, but also a lot in the UK. A lot of people ask me like, what do you speak about? Well, do you know how some people are kind of going through life and they experience a failure and then, or maybe not even a failure, maybe a loss, and then it sort of creates this doubt or this fear in the future when they're either up for an opportunity or they want to start a business or they think they can do something, but they're like, yeah, I don't know. They don't really have the belief in themselves. You can probably relate. We can all relate to that on some level, right?
Yeah, totally.
So what I do and what my speech does in my programs is really they enable that confidence and that courage to overcome that fear, overcome that failure, and to really live your dream life right now, to start to believe that you can actually live your dream life right now. Hence, having conversations with someone like you who is, from the outside looking in, you are already living your dream life and you're continuing to create that. Now, obviously, not everyone that follows me loves to travel, but
yeah, sure.
This is sort of a passion project for me because I teach this stuff. And this is my future dream life, which is doing things like you are doing, which is living in Portugal or traveling all over or hanging out in Africa every other month, or all over the world, right? So my wife and I are thinking about renting out the house next year. It's going to happen. And we're going to start with a van or RV tour around the US for, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 months, maybe a year.
Oh, amazing.
And then we're just going to bust out and just let it rip. So today's conversation is all about that journey and that fun and that excitement. Okay?
Yeah,
for sure. Up for that?
Amazing. Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Okay. Perfect. And I'd be doing myself a disservice if I didn't also share one of the other micro niches of people that I do work with is speakers. People that are either aspiring speakers that they want to enable confidence and courage to express their unique message. So it all centers around enabling confidence and courage. That's just sort of a micro niche that I also work with. Also entrepreneurs that want to they have a message basically. Maybe they don't want to be a speaker all around the world, but they have a message they want to share and they want to become world class at sharing it. So enough about me. The whole rest of this, I want to be about you.
No, that's awesome context though. Thank you for that.
Beautiful. Let's jump right in. Why don't we just share a little bit about Ms. Kathleen Hamilton. I'm so excited to have you on today. Share a little bit about who you are, where you are right now, and what is it that you're up to in the world? Like, what do you do? How do you do
Amazing.
this?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Clinton, for having me. I'm super excited to be here. So, so I am a full-time, or have been a full-time digital nomad. I'm in an interesting transition point right now, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But I work remotely. I am the head of product for Genius U, which is an online entrepreneur education network. And I also run a side project, which is the Purposeful Remote Work Community, all about helping people actually transition into remote work that also makes a difference and an impact in the world in some way. Because my belief around remote work and digital nomadism and having the privilege to do that myself is that whenever someone is working on something or working on a project or has a job that is related to their purpose and their impact in the world, they have a more positive, more fulfilling life. And I believe everyone has the ability to do that. It's just, we're not really taught how to do that in school, right? And we're not really taught how to do that in mainstream culture either, but we're seeing more and more of this come up. So yeah, my mission is really to support people to get into work that gives them the freedom to have a life that they want to live, whatever that looks like. And so I get to do that through my side project and the Ikigaia podcast. But for me, I also then have this amazing full-time job, which I love and which enables me to travel the world as well. So that's kind of what I've been doing over the last few years.
That's great. So, I mean, you heard it here, folks. You can actually have a job. There are actually companies out there that allow you to travel and live all around the world. So
yes,
what would be your advice to anybody that maybe has a job and maybe they don't want to become an entrepreneur? What should they look for in a company culture or in a company? What are some of the qualities that you've noticed that they should look for?
Yeah, and I think what's amazing about the time right now is there's actually more companies than ever working remote. And even if you're listening and you're in a job, it's very likely over the last few months you've had to work from home, right? There's a lot of jobs now that have had to move remote, and now offices are starting to bring people back in. The first thing always, if you're in a job and you're looking to work remotely, have a conversation with your boss, because there's a possibility that if you're in a job you're already kind of enjoying and you wouldn't mind doing it elsewhere and you think you could do it elsewhere, and I guarantee you could, have that conversation with your manager, your team, whoever, to actually clear that. And there's so many amazing templates and stuff actually online now that you can use for those conversations. The second thing is, if you're looking for a company, I think the preconceived notion is that all the companies that allow you to work remote right now are in tech. That's false. There are amazing companies that are not in tech. I've seen jobs, nonprofits have all sorts of work that's remote. There's all sorts of writing jobs, digital marketing. Like there are a lot of tech opportunities, but there are also companies who are realizing that remote work cuts their costs and also increases their reach, right? Because if you're able to work from anywhere in the world, you're able to bring the message of that company with you. So check out online job boards. There are freelancer boards, there are job boards. Just do some research. Check out LinkedIn. There's actually a remote filter there now. So there's absolutely no reason that you can't already be understanding just what's out there. It's just about realizing it's out there, right? Which I think so many of us get stuck in our little like boxes and understandings of the world that we don't even look. But just take a look. There's so many options. And I really do think that everyone has a skill that is transferable to remote work, whatever it is you do, 100%. Whether you're a project manager or you're really good at detail or you're really good at writing or content creation. Like for every single one of those things, there's a remote role, which I think is so exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to get really jazzed up about this whole idea, one of the books that I recommend is The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Oh, that's like the digital nomad Bible.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up. You don't have to go into your full journey, but where you grew up and where are you right now in the world?
Oh yeah, of course I didn't even answer that at the beginning. So I'll start where I am now and work backwards a little bit. So right now I'm in Portugal, in Lisbon, which is very much known as kind of one of the hubs of digital nomadism. And if you are someone that's interested in travel, I definitely recommend checking out nomadlist.com, which just has like an amazing, it has breakdowns of like different cities and which are the most popular for digital nomads and all sorts of things like costs and links to useful local websites and stuff like that. So worth checking out as a resource. But that's how I initially like saw Lisbon, was actually because I never had Portugal on my like bucket list of places. I was just like, oh nice, Southern Europe, it's probably really sunny, you know. But actually coming here, it's gorgeous. I'm absolutely obsessed, and in recent times have decided to slow my travel down a little bit and create a bit of a home base, and it's just the perfect place to do that. Also, like they really favor and want digital nomads and people who work in online professions and are being paid overseas. There's a lot of like nice tax benefits if you actually, then decide to create your home here. But yeah, so previous to this, I was traveling for around about 3 years full time, and kind of like country hopping pretty often. I wasn't really in one place before the pandemic for more than 2 months. That was the maximum I spent anywhere, and that was only like once across the 3 years. Previous to that, I was in San Francisco, and I actually grew up in Bali. So I had a unusual childhood, and I'm actually the third generation of kids who were born overseas from where they're from. So my parents also were both born overseas, and my grandparents. I'm originally British. My accent is probably very confusing, and that's okay. It's a bit of like amalgamation of all the places I've been. But yeah, so I had the absolute blessing and fortune to grow up in Indonesia and also Singapore and also the UK. So it was a bit all over the place, and meet people from all over the world. So my love for this lifestyle and for traveling and meeting people from all backgrounds and getting to know different cultures has definitely been instilled in me from a very young age.
Would you say that's one of your passions? Or, because my next question is, what are you passionate about?
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because when I hear like people are like, oh, travel's my passion. And I'm like, I guess it must be, I had never thought of it that way because it always just felt like a default setting, it's like saying like being at home is my passion. Like this is like home for me. It's really bizarre, but I guess I would list it as one of my passions. And I think that it feels like a really natural state of being for me, like packing up a suitcase and going somewhere and, having to get to know somewhere from scratch. And then my other passions are really around people. Pretty much all of my passions are around people. I'm a really person-centric individual. My relationships are really important to me, but even larger than that, I think I have a real passion around purpose, which sounds maybe a little bit like weird and entangled, but people who are mission driven, who are making an impact in some way. I'm really passionate about supporting people to do that. And I'm really passionate about companies that do that, because I have a pretty deep ingrained belief that companies and businesses and entrepreneurs are the best suited to change the world. And I think that companies that are really like forefront with the impact that they're committed to making and who are doing really cool things in the world is something that I'm super passionate about. So I'm really into entrepreneurship, people, and purpose. Those are definitely my like intersecting webs. That's and there's other pieces to that, like sustainability, just because of growing up in Bali, it was very close to home, and art and activism, all of that's in there as well. But definitely like the three core are those. Yeah. That's
great. That's great. So passions are people, purpose, and oh my goodness, I lost the third one.
Oh my gosh, now I did too, now that you've reiterated it back to me. People,
folks.
Yeah, just entrepreneurship.
Oh, entrepreneurship, of course. Yeah. Now, is that what led you to your Ikigai podcast? And you might want to spell that for folks out there.
Yeah.
Tell us just a little bit about that. It sounds like your passions may have led you to that, perhaps. Tell us a little bit more about who you interview on that.
Yeah, so Ikigai is interesting because I've never been really strong at naming. So I actually went out to my community and I was like, what should I name my podcast?
It's brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, like Ikigai is very much like in the mainstream personal development consciousness now. So I feel like a lot of your audience might know about it. But for anyone that doesn't, I'll just reiterate quickly. Ikigai is the concept. It's a Japanese word, and it literally translates into your reason for being. And basically it takes 4 concentric circles which intersect, and it's your mission, so like how you're going to make an impact, how you can earn, your talents, and your your impact, and what you enjoy doing. And it's where those 4 things intersect, and that's your Ikigai, right? It's like your reason for being, the why you wake up in the morning, why you go and do the things you do. And then Gaia obviously is the word for earth. So my whole thing around like really believing that the world would be a better place if everyone could do what they loved to do. And that, more impacts would be made if everyone could do what they love to do and actually get paid for it. So that's like the world that I want to live in. So Ikigaia, Ikigaia, for anyone that's looking for it. And I interview people on purpose. So have conversations with people who are living the life that they love and earning money, doing what they love to do. And there's so many different models for that. And I think that's one of the things that I really stand by is like, There's not a one size fits all path. There are different ways of doing it. You can be an entrepreneur who starts their own business. You can be an entrepreneur who helps other people start their businesses. You can also be an entrepreneur working for someone, right? I think it's more of this like mindset around actually actively wanting to grow and change yourself and learn things quickly and make plans and stick to them, right? So there's just like all of these different elements and different ways of doing things depending on what kind of person you are. But the Ikigaia podcast is all about just sharing those stories so that people know what's out there. So I try to get really different guests and people who are having very different lived experiences and people across all sorts of like age and, you know, socioeconomic backgrounds and countries. So it's really, I just love having the conversations. Honestly, it was a bit of a selfish pursuit. I'm sure you kind of feel the same way. It's like having a podcast is such a cool way to get to just connect with people and have those conversations, and hopefully bring a lot of value to people that are listening as well.
Yeah, I love that, Kathleen. First of all, sign me up as a listener. And if you'd like to have me on as a guest,
I would love to.
You totally are swimming in the same lane.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I got the chills when you were saying it. I was like, yes. Like, that is
I would love to, yeah.
Let's do
it's
that.
So much fun.
We'll talk about that later. Okay, so I love to find out how people, not to get personal, right, about how people make money, because a lot of people that are considering going overseas or living abroad or even doing it in their own country, perhaps in an RV, they're like, well, how am I going to make money? So now we already covered this a little bit, so we don't need to go too deep. But you have a job, and it's like there are opportunities out there, and it might be in the exact job you're in right now. Right? It might be in the exact job you're in right now. And Kathleen gave some great advice on what to look for in companies if perhaps your company is not an opportunity. But have that conversation with your boss. And then you're also creating through your podcast. You know, I know there are ways to monetize that in the future. You don't really need to tell me anything about that. But then you also are leading something you said around remote work. Is that part of your job? Is that something that you're doing on your own? Is there anything else you're doing or any advice you'd give, any additional around how people make money?
Yeah, for sure. I have lots of advice around that.
Okay, I know you covered a decent amount of this already.
Yeah, for sure. So there's definitely like a few pretty templated ways that you can go about making money while traveling or just living a lifestyle that has the freedom that you want. I've had conversations with a lot of people that are like, I just want to not work so many hours in the week. And I'm like, yeah, I totally get it. And there's ways to do that, right? So ultimately, any making money is all just about an exchange of value, right? And when you're in a job, it's time for money. So my job, I give my time for money, and I do that totally shamelessly because I love just the ease of that transaction. I'm like, wow, okay, you just want me to show up and like accomplish these things. Luckily, I have a job that I absolutely adore, and it like pushes me so hard to grow. I definitely recommend if you're like in a place where you're looking for that kind of challenge, go find a startup. There are plenty of them now. A startup, yeah, it will really push you. But it's great.
Can we pause right here as well? Because you just said something that for you and I, because we understand Ikigai and you know, that kind of body of work, some folks that are listening might be like, well, how do I find something that I love? Like, talk to us a little bit about flow. I don't want to go too much into it, but talk to us a little bit about finding something that's really aligned with your unique gifts and talents. Just a little soundbite on that, please.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely, like, if you're looking for templates on this, Clinton might have some. I have some on my website, which will be in the show notes, so you can find that as well. But there's a lot of...
Share it now, though, the website.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, it's Kathleen Hamilton, just my name, .me, and that's my website. And there's a freebie section on there where you can find some templates for kind of getting clarity around your purpose. But the easiest way for me, like the easiest exercise, which I'll share very quickly, which you can do as you're listening to this podcast, let it be the thing that you're doing in the background. You can actually like make a list of all the things that you like doing. You don't have to love doing them, but all the things that you enjoy doing. And then make a list next to that of all the things you think you're good at. And they could be whatever, like it could be obscure and strange and things that you're like, there's no way I could get paid for that, right? I guarantee you someone will pay you for it. Like the world is a very big place. There's a lot of stuff happening, right? So make those two lists. And then the third list is make a list of like either people that you want to work with. So types of people you want to work with. So describe them, or like something that really lights you up, like something, if you feel you're really passionate about, you know, making sure young people have access to education, or you're really passionate about, you went on an experience where you actually got to like interface and like have experiences with people who were in a different like wealth bracket than you, and they were maybe in poverty, and you really like that really lit you up. Just write down the things that light you up. When you have those three things, you're that much closer to getting to your purpose, right? Like what you're actually wanting to do. And this is the thing about purpose. You don't need to just have one in your entire life. I think we have this idea that you have to like find your purpose and that's it, but that's so not it, right? You're going to find something and that's going to be it for a while. And you're gonna be like, wow, I really like doing that, but actually I want to go try this other thing. And that's the beautiful thing about life, is you have all these opportunities to grow and change. So don't choose something or avoid choosing something because you feel like you're then going to be stuck and you're a commitment phobe. I'm a commitment phobe. I totally get it. Like, but you just need to start moving forward towards something, whatever that might look like, and start with those kind of three key areas. And then you can do things to like eliminate ones, or actually like rank some of those things higher that you've said. Particularly look for where they intersect, right? Like if you're really good at something and you're like, hey, actually that would help the people that I really care about, or you're really good at something and you really enjoy doing it. That's like a big, like you want to note that, because those are the intersections where you're actually going to get closer and closer to what, and start experimenting. If you then have a list of 3 things, you can actually start experimenting in that area, like finding jobs that kind of fit that, or thinking about, maybe you're the kind of person that wants to start their own thing. So you're going to be thinking about business ideas, right? Like, but use that framework of those 3 areas and, brainstorming those to actually get yourself closer to what might be a purpose for you.
I love it. So look at the things that you like, look at the things you're good at, look at the people that potentially you want to partner with, and what lights you up overall. One of the things you said that really resonated with me, Kathleen, was, and this because it's happened to me, is I wanted there's so many people in the world that really want to make an impact. The world is changing, society's changing, the way we think is changing, and we want more meaning in our lives. Where things are crumbling around us, right? Some of the institutions are crumbling, but more importantly, so the way of thinking, I believe, is shifting. Yes. And we're starting to want more purpose and more meaning. And we sometimes put too much significance on it. And I love what you said. You said, it doesn't have to be the end all be all. You're not only going to have potentially one purpose in your life, your purpose evolves over time. The most important thing, like you said, is you just be in action, right? And one of the things I share with my audience is I say, if you're looking for your purpose, stop. Now you might actually be taken aback by that because you love purpose. Well, that's what I'm about to say. If you're looking for your purpose, stop. It will be waiting for you when you start doing the things that you love.
Yes.
Right? And I don't mean it's just waiting there. It'll be revealed to you as you get in motion. And guess what? I got that. I didn't get it word for word, but I got elements of that literally from a t-shirt that I bought in Bali. No, seriously. And
That's brilliant.
It's so meshed with my already way of thinking. And I kind of weaved it around. It was more about finding your soulmate or your love, which I believe is the same thing. When you start doing the things that you love, like Kathleen just said, the things you're great at, things that light you up, you get into the flow, you start vibrating at a different level, and you start attracting things into your life. You start seeing things in your life that before you did not see. So love your feedback on that. Okay, so let's keep rolling here. I've got some awesome questions for you. I want to go back to 3 years ago, before you started traveling full time. Now, I know that you've always kind of traveled with your family and you grew up in Bali and all over the world in really cool places. But what were you doing right before you decided to go? And like, what made you say, I'm traveling? What was it? If you could bring yourself back to that.
Yeah. So 3 years ago, I was living my dream life in San Francisco. So I got to backtrack a little bit more just to give some context to that.
Please.
But I initially went to college in San Francisco straight out of Bali, and it was kind of a tough ride. Like San Francisco is a difficult city to live in if you've come from somewhere like Bali. Like
very different.
because it's, you know, it has this amazing history. It's super phenomenal. And also it has like a massive wealth gap and huge amounts of homelessness and like a really like hustle culture, right? Where you just have to be like working yourself to the bone all the time, which is not something that I believe is like a healthy mentality. I'm much more into flow than hustle. And with like, I left San Francisco midway through my college career because I was like, I can't stay here. I need to go somewhere that's like more my tempo. So I moved to Oregon. But after I finished college, I was like, wow, I really like didn't have the story I wanted to have in San Francisco. Like I wanted that to go differently, because when I was romanticizing it before I went to university, I was like, oh, but like San Francisco, like love and peace and the hippie era. And also it's like the edge of the US. So there's so much innovation. And I just felt like I didn't get to be part of any of that when I first went. So I was like, okay, I'm going to rewrite my story. And I wrote the list of all the things I wanted. And this is like a huge thing, right? Like just having clarity over what you actually want to get out of an experience. And so I wrote this whole list and I was like, I want to live in a community house, which is like a co-op, which is like an intentional community where you've got people around. And usually there's like a lot of like food sharing programs and just like all this cool stuff that you get to be a part of. And I wanted to work at Burning Man. I was like, I had just gone to Burning Man the year before. And I was like, I'm going to work at Burning Man. They have like an HQ in San Francisco. And I was like, and I want to learn to spin fire. So I wrote all these things down. And within a month of finishing university, I moved to San Francisco to my like dream community house. I found the fire spinning scene. It wasn't difficult to do. San Francisco is full of them. and I actually just showed up and I had no idea what I was doing, but I had bought my first like prop that I could light on fire. And I had an interview at Burning Man. And I was like, wow, okay, that happened very quickly. And so over the course of that year, I like lived my dream life. I actually ended up being like a volunteer coordinator at Burning Man, which was very cool. I got to meet some phenomenal people. I got to like spin fire and actually ended up doing like my first performance 1 year later where I was actually performing live for people, which was really cool. Just like all this stuff, you know, that I actually really wanted to. I had these amazing connections at this community house, like got into the whole co-op scene in San Francisco. And I lived literally up the street from the corner of Haight and Ashbury, which is like the sign that everyone probably knows, which is like the center of what was like the hippie movement way back in the 60s, right? And so when all this finished, I was like, wow, okay, I've done my year. And like I finished my visa. I'm not from the US, so I couldn't stay. There was no option for me to stay. I didn't have employment there. I had already started picking up this online job, right? Around Genius U and entrepreneurship. And I was doing interviews of entrepreneurs and writing their stories. And it kind of showed me, while being in the US, I did start falling into like the hustle and grind mentality. I was like, the only way I'm going to succeed is if I work really, really long hours doing something I don't like doing to earn enough money to like get to the next step, right? And things felt really difficult. I was like, well, I've had this amazing year in San Francisco. I don't just want to like go and sit in an office, but I also can't stay in America. So like, what am I going to do? And I was writing these stories about entrepreneurs and getting paid money to do that. And I was like, okay, well, this is enough to get by, but I don't think it's enough to do anything else. And then I started finding other ways that I could help Genius U. And so I offered to be a community manager. And then I offered to like help on other projects people were working on. And bit by bit, I like grew my income to the point where I was like, okay, I could actually do something with this. And also at some point, I just realized that I was working online. I was like, whoa, I'm actually already working online. This is what some people wait to do. And I'm in my 20s and I need to see the world, you know, like there's no reason for me to be stuck in one place. And I had just started dating this boy who I told like, look, I'm leaving. And if you want to come, you can. And he was like, yep, sign me up. And it just so happened that within a very short period of time, I had a plan. I had enough income to sustain me and I had a very willing travel partner. And so we just kind of like hopped on because I was like, well, it's on to the next adventure. You know, I just built this whole 1 year. There's absolutely no reason I can't do that again anywhere I go. So that just kind of became the plan. And we had this whole thing in mind where we were like, yeah, one day we'll find a place that we love and settle down, but we didn't have a deadline for that. But now that's happened too. So it all, you know, happened in its own time. But, you know, the long-winded story to answer your question is just to say that I think it was all in the books and I just didn't know it yet.
Wow. Now, there's obviously a level of preparation that you did do there on some level. You know, part of it was just a realization like, wait a minute, I'm already kind of doing this and I can like go travel as well.
Yeah.
So how did you know? I want to talk a little bit about like faith. And I don't mean religious faith necessarily. What I mean is more of a knowingness, like an inner knowingness, even though you don't know the how,
Yeah.
which is where, in my opinion, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
When you know anything's possible and you just feel it, it's like intuition. You feel it's the right thing. You don't know how you're going to do it, but you do it anyways. That courage to take action. Walk us through what that was like for you. Like, how did you know? Was it a knowingness? Was it logical? What was it for you?
Yeah, there's a couple pieces to that, right? Because on the one hand, I 100% believe in your concept of faith. And I do think that there is like, you know, just trusting the universe and trusting yourself. And I think even another variant of that is when you just decide, the universe conspires to make it happen with you, you know? And sometimes decision is driven by desperation, right? So for me, I didn't have a choice but to leave. I knew I had to leave America. And I really didn't have anywhere to go. Like, I grew up in a global family, which now means that everyone is all over the world and no one has a sofa for me. So I was like, all right, if I leave, I got to figure out what I'm doing. And I think just by the point that I knew that I had to leave, I knew that wherever I went, I'd be fine. There was just this like faith that I had, because I managed to make it in San Francisco, which in my head I had built up to be this big, scary place that I couldn't tough it out in.
Right.
And instead I had designed a year where I had a phenomenal year and I was perfectly capable, right? But it was only like I had built up enough faith in myself by that point that I was like, okay, whatever I choose to do, I'll figure it out. I'll make it work. And I think that's the kind of courage that not enough of us are taught to have. Like and even though my parents really did try to teach it to me, I still somehow unlearned that courage again. And I was suddenly just afraid. But I also think it's just a rite of passage to like learn that courage. So by the point that I was ready to go, I just had faith in myself. I was like, because at a certain point, if you're going to choose to create a life of uncertainty, right, which is something we kind of touched upon, is like, you know, if you're choosing to travel and you're choosing to, or another variant of this, if you're choosing to freelance or you're choosing to build your own business, you are creating some level of uncertainty, right? Because you're stepping out of what is a planned thing for you, right? Like university has been planned for you. All you got to do is show up. If you go to work and you're just trading your time for money, quite often everything's planned for you. You just have to show up and do the work, right? If you're choosing to create a life for yourself, no one is planning that for you. And unless you plan it, literally anything could happen. But as soon as you decide what it is that you want to do, and you are very clear about that, you know, like for me, I was like, I want to travel and be, you know, I want to be fully location independent, and I want to earn, you know, enough money a month that I can pay my bills and have extra to save. Like I knew all that. I knew my numbers. I knew what I wanted. And so then when I jumped off and I took that leap, the faith wasn't just in the universe. It was also in the plan that I had made, because I knew that I would do whatever it took to get there. And the universe was conspiring for my greatness. And so was everyone else in my life, you know, because as soon as I told other people, like, this is what I'm doing, they're like, oh, come crash with me. Like, come stay at my house. Like, actually, traveling ended up being way less expensive than living in San Francisco was. And suddenly my like salary, which at the time I had thought was like quite menial, then grew to this like amount where I was like, wow, I can afford that plane ticket or that train ticket or that Airbnb, because actually, like, I'm spending so much less money than I was living in the city, you know?
So I want to go there in one moment. That's definitely a topic that I know I and a lot of people that want to travel and live overseas, they have that question about, like, how much do I actually need?
How much does it cost? Yeah, right.
Yeah, but you just hit on some, like, you're like dropping gold right here for the people out there watching and listening. The power of writing down your goals, first and foremost. You talked about that in creating, going back to San Francisco, and you even said rewriting your history, and you literally rewrote it exactly how you wanted it, and boom, you created it in short order. And that's the beauty of this, you know, is that it actually isn't linear. It doesn't have to be like you write it down and then this, that, and it takes like 3 years. It can happen very, very quickly. So love that. I loved how you touched on hustle versus flow. The US culture is so dominated by hustle. You're so spot on. And Gary Vee, God bless the guy, but I don't really agree with 90% of what he says. But it's not that he doesn't say smart things about business. It's just I don't agree with his context of hustle. Look at the guy. He looks like he's working 10,000 hours a day. Like, that's
probably
not
does.
fun. That's not life. Like, you can have a great, successful business or a no business. Just have a great, successful life, very fulfilled life, and not work 40 hours or, you know, 18 hours a day or whatever, right? So I love that. And then I love what you talked about a very real reality of choosing to go overseas or even to just live in an RV or whatever is you're creating consciously or maybe unconsciously a life of uncertainty. And bringing consciousness to that fact, you then created certainty by creating clarity of what you wanted in that experience. This is what I'm gathering anyways. You said you knew your numbers, you knew how much you were making, you knew, approximately how much you had to make. And what you realized when you started traveling is, holy cow, I don't need to even make as much, so I can live even a little better, or it's a little easier. So walk us into that. Like, before we talk about some of the great places you've been, because I do want to talk about that as well, and your favorite places and all that. Like, what do you need to realistically make? And I know it depends on the country, but start to lead us into that conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So I think one thing that maybe a lot of us are not so, and don't get me wrong, I was not good at this before. I was never good at budgeting or numbers. I hated opening my bank accounts because I was always afraid there was going to be less in them than I thought. And actually for a lot of, all of my university years, I had a lot less in my bank accounts than I thought every time I opened them. But when I realized that I wanted to go traveling, I started quite consciously knowing how much there was in there so that I could save up. And then, when there's definitely lots of different ways to travel, and my preference always is to find out who I know in a country before I go there, because there's always an option there, so you can keep your costs really low. But actually, like in Europe, groceries generally are actually a lot cheaper than the US. That may not be something that you guys know, but it's like, and not all European countries, don't get me wrong. Like if you go somewhere like the Nordic countries, those are like unanimously very expensive in comparison to, so like out there when we did go to, but we spent very little time there. So we started off in the UK, which is familiar to me because I grew up there. And the currency is the pound, which used to be a lot higher valued. It's not so much now, but that was like a tricky thing, was like, first of all, currency conversion. Okay, what do I need to do there? And then like cost of living generally nomadically per month. And I am traveling with a partner, but I'll be very transparent about that. So we share living costs, right? Because we can just sleep in the same room. But our living costs per month, I probably out of pocket paid 1,500 euros, which is about $1,500. There's not a massive difference there. Just me. So together we had a shared expenses of 3,000 euros. We were obviously buying groceries together. We were like living together, but also those were on the months where we were doing like 7 countries. Like we bought a train pass and we just like hopped country for 1 month. So we did just over 7 countries, probably more than that in 1 month. And it was like, that's a third of what I needed in San Francisco to pay rent. And like, that was like my entire rent in San Francisco. And I just like paid groceries, paid living expenses, paid travel expenses, paid all of the different bus passes I had to get in every country. And it was super inexpensive. And I know people who do it for less money than that. As soon as you get to Southeast Asia, you're looking at like 1,000 euros, $1,000 a month. And you would probably be fine if you were willing to live in shared accommodation or accommodation that like wasn't, the Marriott, but you'd be fine on that much.
Let's talk about that, Kathleen, about in terms of that level, 1,500 approximately per person. And of course you shared. So would you say for a single person, it would be about 3,000 in some countries?
I actually think in Europe as a single person, you could do it for more like 2,000 euros. And that's like, if you were you were renting Airbnbs solo, like you're trying to get like a private Airbnb. If you're looking at hostels, like you can do like 5 euros a night hostels and it's cheap as chips. So, and obviously like, I don't know the age of your audience, but so there are some people that are like, I wouldn't live in hostels, but you can also go to hostels that have private rooms, and there's all sorts of variants of like grades of that now. There are also now amazing like co-living options that are higher, what I would call like higher end, they're not hostels, which are based around co-working spaces. So there's co-working spaces now that have popped up with living spaces, and they'll have multiple countries where they exist. So you can buy a membership and then your actual accommodation is really low cost. And that's a really cool way to travel as well. Obviously find a co-working / co-living organization or company that you vibe with. You're like, yeah, that looks cool. But there's a whole bunch of those as well. I should probably put a list together of those because I know a lot of them now. But
that's a great little giveaway on your site. And in fact, for sure, I would love to know if Do you have like a tip of one right now that you've heard of that has co-live, co-work?
Yeah. Right off the top of my head, there is Selena is one. They have some amazing tropical destinations. So if you're looking at South America, they're pretty awesome. Also, Outsite is one that I know and personally love. I haven't stayed with them, but I've used their co-working spaces a lot, and that's Outsite. They're super cool. And yeah, I like what they're doing around the world as well. They also have a lot of locations.
Beautiful. That's brilliant advice. So in terms of the like that range of 2,000 for an individual, 3,000 for a couple in most countries, and a little less in Southeast Asia, what are you typically looking at in terms of places to stay? Are you looking at hostels at that rate? Are you looking at Airbnbs or a combination of two?
Yeah, up to now, we've basically exclusively done Airbnbs. And the reason for that is like I work from home and now my boyfriend does too. So we both work online. So we need guaranteed good internet. We need guaranteed quiet time so we can like get our work done. I think now if I were to do it again from scratch, I would probably go with one of the co-living, co-working options. But when we started, we didn't know about them. And
Why
we
is that?
also, I didn't look
Keep
for them,
going, tell me.
honestly. Yeah, it didn't even like occur to me to be like, oh, well, people, I also think that they've only recently become popularized. I didn't know a lot about being a digital nomad. In fact, I kind of pushed away from the term to begin with because I was like, that sounds really pretentious. I was like, digital nomad, what is that, right? And then I started doing it and I started meeting digital nomads and I was like, man, these people are all so cool. And that's really like, it's actually pretentious of me to think they're pretentious. So,
Yeah,
and don't get me
exactly.
wrong, there's always sour eggs in any basket, but for the most part, like everyone was amazing. And like co-working spaces, oh my gosh, changed my life. Like, you know, actually going and like sitting in this beautiful environment that has been designed for productivity and work and focus around other people who are working on inspiring, like uplifting projects or just a startup, whatever. But it's like very invigorating to be around. And so I started going to more of those when we were traveling and I like didn't have good Wi-Fi or we were in a city where I had access to that. So like when we were in Bali, I just got a co-working membership for a month because I was like, I get so much more done there than I do sitting at home and I get
Yeah.
to meet all these cool people and there's always awesome events as well. So if you are choosing to travel, and there's also like in the States, I'm sure there's like, if you're planning on traveling around the US, I guarantee there are co-working spaces. And, you know, worst comes to worst, go to a WeWork. And
Yeah.
WeWork is everywhere. And WeWork does have some cool events and stuff. I found them not as warm and friendly as some of the smaller co-working spaces because they're like really wanting to focus on cultivating community, which I think is super cool.
Yeah. So in terms of pricing, do you have an idea of what a co-live, co-work space would be, or have you not yet explored the co-live,
Ooh,
co-work
yeah, I
versus
have
an
I have
Airbnb?
actually looked at a couple. Let me see if I can dredge it up out of my memory. Like I know there were. So like usually when we are looking at Airbnbs for the two of us to stay together, the cap of the nightly amount we want to spend is like 60 euros, $60. So like we don't want to spend $30 each more than that per night
Right.
because then it starts getting pretty pricey, right? We prefer even lower than that because you're still looking at like, you know, over 1,000 shared costs per week there.
What are you
So on,
finding is for that price point, what are you getting typically?
oh yeah, you're getting like it depends where you are in Europe, like, but in Europe, generally in like the more standard countries, so like Prague, the Czech Republic, France, places that you don't think of them and think, oh, that would be really expensive. Like when you think of, you know, Switzerland, you're like, wow, that must be really expensive. That's like you know, so think about countries that you don't immediately think that. And if you don't have the knowledge of Europe, you can just do some browsing on Airbnb. But I would say usually for like 60 euros a night, you're able to get your own place, like your own apartment with a kitchen, a closed bathroom, so not like a studio apartment. I try to avoid those because then you're just like in the same room all the time.
Yeah.
A bedroom with a door and a living room, and it's like usually relatively spacious. Like I think the place I'm in right now is actually a little bit less than that, less cost than that, but is that it's like a room, a bedroom, and they're like well sized, right? Like we could probably fit a person on the sofa if we wanted to. And obviously, like if you're smart with how you plan your travel, like if you do plan a little bit ahead, which we did not, then you can actually find places that are cheap and really nice a lot more easily. So if you do like to plan ahead, I definitely advise doing so. If you don't though, you'll find spots, even if they're maybe a little bit harder to get to or not in the city center. So, you know, and look up public transportation wherever you go, because like when we were in Sweden, for example, we only stayed for 2 nights because it was super expensive. But we we stayed pretty far out of the city center to cut on costs because we knew that we could like get a train in because the rail system there is amazing. So, so you can be smart about how you budget, but because we know there's two of us, right? And we would both pay for things out of pocket differently. We don't have any shared accounts. So we got into the habit of tracking how much we spent so that we could get that money back from the other person. Like neither of us is the sole breadwinner. We are equal costs sharing. So because of that, we got into this really good rhythm of actually checking our expenses and knowing how much was going out every week. So if there was a week where we spent more than we wished we had, we would then, cut our costs the following week. So our flexibility allowed us to do that. If you're planning ahead rather than doing what we were doing, which was doing it entirely on the fly, you may design, whatever you're going to do with that in mind, which I do think is a smart way to do things, like if you are the planning type.
Yeah. Tell us about your favorite locations and also the most affordable ones, like best value versus just best experience. Anything you want to share about that that's fun for you, share with us, the countries or cities.
Oh my gosh. Well, in the last 3 years, I've done now 23 or 24 countries. In my lifetime, I've actually done 40. I just tallied it up the other day. I was like, wow, that's actually a lot of countries. We're only 25. Yeah, 40 countries. I'm going to get to 50 by the time I'm 30. That's my plan. So I got 10 more to do in the next 5 years, which is totally doable.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, I just came back from a trip to Greece and that is still really stuck in my head. So I'm going to give a couple of like areas. Greece is like very affordable if you go to the islands. So like Crete, for example, there's some amazing, like you go to a hostel there and it actually feels like, a like four-star place because you can get so much value for money. The food is phenomenal and the beaches are like, I can't say some of the best in Europe because I haven't been to that many European beaches, but I imagine they're pretty high up there. So Crete is amazing. And just like the water is so blue, it very much feels like a dream. And I know some of the other Greek islands also are very beautiful. Some of them are very expensive. So, but Crete is one that I enjoyed and was good value for money. If we're staying on the tropical island route, I mean, Bali is every digital nomad's dream, I think. Growing up there and going back as an adult was a weird experience. I still love Bali and have a very fond place in my heart for it. And also sometimes you go and it's like so inundated with tourists and people that you're like, is this the right thing to be doing? Am I helping or hindering the progress? But in North Bali, if you're going to go to North Bali or go to the islands and you'll get that like secluded kind of like amazing value for money pretty much everywhere in Bali. So it's one of those places that people go and stay for quite a long time, which I totally recommend doing. Like if you're going to go, like spend a few months there, and you'll just get a lot more out of the experience. It likes to teach difficult lessons. So it's a good place to go if you're looking for some spiritual transformation, which you probably know if you watched Eat, Pray, Love.
Yes.
Don't use that as a guidebook. Go and meet some locals, meet some people in co-working spaces, and you'll get the tips and tricks that you want. So Greece, Bali, and then I am in love with Portugal currently. So that's like a big spot for me. Oh, also Prague, amazing for like the tourist stuff. Like I reckon, go and see some castles and cathedrals and it just like really like sets off all of the amazing fairy tale kind of imagery that you've always dreamt of. Prague is definitely the place for that in the Czech Republic. So yeah, I've given you 4, but I have loved everywhere in a different way. I'll give you some places I didn't fall in love with because that's like, I didn't fall in love with Denmark and I would love someone to prove me wrong. I really want to go back and like explore like the outskirts, but Copenhagen is not a city that I like fell in love with. But if you like cycling, I'm sure it's amazing. I just walked around everywhere and it felt very flat. But yeah, actually most other places I loved. I can't really think of anywhere else.
Kathleen, have you been to Spain or Italy? Did you spend any time in either one of those? You talked about
have.
Those are too high on my list.
Yeah. So I've been to Italy multiple times. I haven't gone in the last 2 years, which is why I didn't mention it. But Italy, yeah, I adore Italy. I think there's, and have I been to mainland Spain? I've been to some of the Spanish islands. So I've been to like Tenerife when I was younger. But I haven't been to Spain itself, but it's very close to Portugal. So I imagine there's some like similarities. And I have friends who like rave about Barcelona. Actually, Dominic, my boyfriend, raves about Barcelona. So definitely a place I want to check out. And then they have Granada, which is like by the beach and also, well, it's like a 40-minute drive to the beach, but also has like mountains for snow sports, which is crazy to me that you have all that in such close proximity. But Italy, yeah, I loved. There's something really special about traveling in Europe, and that's the reason why we've spent so much time here the last couple of years, which is that it is so freaking old. You know, like if you live in America, your civilization is younger than most of the buildings and most of the cobblestone streets here, which is just a trip to think about, you know? Yeah, and Italy really felt that way to me, like going to, obviously being in Rome and seeing the Colosseum, but also like Florence, they have amazing like fountains and gardens, and you walk around and you're just like blown away by just kind of the stories and the history and the mysticism. And I really loved the south of Italy. I went to Naples and it was just stunning, like amazing, like road trip through Italy, I think would be a cool way to do it, because there's so many little cities all over the place, which are fun.
How was it financially in Italy?
Yeah, don't if you're in like Rome or like Milan, very expensive. I went to Milan and I actually couch surfed, which is an interesting way to travel. You literally, it's called couch surfing, and people just offer you their couch. And I stayed with some random dude from couch surfing, and it was very safe, and like I felt fine, and I got to meet, like, it's a cool community, but it was, yeah, I was so expensive that I didn't pay for accommodation anywhere. And I was a bit younger. I was like in university when I did it, so I was a lot more stingy than I am now. But Naples, like, go to the south of Italy, and oh my gosh, I was actually blown away at how cheap the food was, like food and produce, if you're actually going to like travel there and cook for yourself and stuff, so cheap. And all the restaurants very cheap. Like I remember buying like unmarked bottles of wine from a guy that made them like in his basement for like €2, you know, and it was amazing wine. so yeah, definitely recommend Italy. Yeah, south of Italy, and then like, you know, a lot of the coastal cities are very, very cool. I haven't been to loads of them, but definitely I would recommend checking them out and doing like a bit of a road trip, because then you can actually see a lot of it.
Yeah, that's definitely on the agenda. So what are some of the big challenges or things to look out for when traveling?
Internet access, if you're going to work remotely. I think, you know, like you're choosing to travel, that's one thing. If you're choosing this like as a lifestyle, like actual remote working and digital nomading and running your business, whatever it is, while on the road, you have to worry about, well, you don't have to worry, you have to plan for a whole lot more, right? Like you need to make sure you have internet access. And when there's internet access, you need to make sure it's good. So like actually, if you're staying with someone or you're paying for accommodation somewhere, you have the right to ask for a speed check of the Wi-Fi. And I recommend you do so, because I haven't a lot. And it's a very good hack. Also, become part of a digital nomad community. Like I didn't become this knowledgeable by just doing it. That's definitely 80% of it. But I also like joined some online communities. There's loads of free Facebook groups for digital nomads or remote workers. And when you go to different cities, there's now city focused like digital nomad groups as well. So they'll have like insider tips of the place that you're in. And also like Nomads List, which I mentioned earlier, which is a great site to just find tips. They also have like a paid community that you can join, which is cool, or you can join my community, which is free. And I'm happy to like give more tips and tricks and stuff. So definitely internet access, like having a routine is impossible and also necessary. So figure out what works for you, whether that's project management software or like I bullet journal. So I physically like write in a notebook and have it on paper, because I just find that that's the most powerful thing for me. And I know what I need to do every day. I didn't do that when I first started traveling, and I always felt this combination of being overworked and not getting enough done, right? Which is just that kind of like you're spinning your wheels. So I recommend like finding some way to plan for yourself so that every week you know what you need to get done, and every day you know what you need to get done, and you just do that and then step away, because otherwise you're just going to find that you will sit and work. Your work is always available to you on the computer, and then you miss all the other stuff. You didn't start traveling just to work, right? So make sure that you've got your structure and your plan in place so that you can step away and feel good about doing that because you've done what you needed to do. So I think those are probably like the key things, because time management and internet access are like the most challenging things about being a digital nomad. And, you know, as long as you're planning and you're aware of your like limits and boundaries, both in terms of cost and like physical ability and everything else, then you can plan around that. But it is a conscious effort, but you'll thank yourself for it later.
Got it. So for those folks out there that are hearing the term digital nomad, and they're maybe not like digitally, they're not like, there may be somebody more like me. who I'm digital, but I'm not like a graphic designer.
Right.
I'm not a blogger. I'm not somebody that writes copy for folks.
Yeah.
I'm a speaker and I train people on how to become speakers. So I do a
Yeah.
lot of work on Zoom and online. But what about folks that are like me, or even that maybe you have a different thing, but it's not doing something necessarily where they make money with their efforts on the computer, although they're going to need to use the computer, obviously. What would you say to them for advice?
Yeah, for sure. So don't be turned off by the digital nomad nomenclature. It is just about how you are able to make money on the move, which will likely be digital. However, and also, like, don't be afraid of digital, because actually having your digital systems in place is what's going to allow you to step away from the computer in the first place. And I 100% recommend, like, getting a consultant for that if you have the means to. Like, there are people who will help you turn your business digital, which will allow you to travel. If you currently run a business in a place, guarantee you can hire a team to run that for you and you can step away. So have the courage to do that. But pretty much all the time, whether it is like a time constraint or a physical constraint, if you hire someone, you're actually going to make more money in less time and you're going to be able to step away, right? So definitely recommend like analyzing where you're at and like being willing to bring other people on and trust other people to help you with what you're doing. And then the other thing I'll say is, if you're currently like working a job and you're looking to transition to a online role that gives you the freedom to travel, all of the skills that you already have are totally applicable. So don't be afraid to, like, you know, and take a look after you've listened to this, like go and have a job search for the stuff that you do, but specify in the job search that you're looking for remote work. You will see stuff pop up. And think of other jobs that you would enjoy doing that maybe aren't what you're doing right now, but you feel that you might have the skills for, and you know, put the filter on for remote. And even if you just Google remote work job boards, there's so many now. And the first page is always filled with tech roles. Do not be afraid of that. Go past the first page, like search for your keyword terms. You'll find jobs that fit what you do. It feels very unattainable because I think we've been deceived into believing that it's only possible for tech workers who make $10,000 a month, which is false. Like, you know, you're not that person, and that's okay. There are other options. But pretty much anything you do. And you know what? If you don't find a job that fits your skills, chances are someone else needs your skills. And then start looking at like people who've started their own businesses using them. Because like, there's one thing that really opened my eyes to this is like virtual assistants. So there's a whole movement in the digital nomad community around people who have become virtual assistants. And these are people that, like, you know, many people are like, oh, well, I don't have any skills, but I'm like really organized. That's a skill, you know, like that. I would pay you to organize my calendar for me. You know, like I pay someone to edit my podcast for me because I don't like audio editing. So like all these little things, like my brother is a video editor. He now does that online and freelances, and like other people pay him to edit their YouTube videos, you know, like there's literally a profession for anything. And obviously maybe those are really digital examples, but if you can account, bookkeep, you know, if you have good sales experience, there are roles for you in all of those places and more. Real estate, guarantee you can do that like online or overseas. There's all sorts of online brokerages now. There's, yeah, really anything that's traditional, it has been transitioned to digital.
Great advice, Kathleen. Great advice. So I want to hear like what's your either funniest story traveling overseas, or like craziest thing that happened to you that maybe you didn't think was going to happen?
Yeah, wow.
Or if you can't think of something, what's just the funnest thing that's happened to you?
I think there's like actually so many that I'm like, where would I even start? One of the craziest things that I had the opportunity to do was actually go to Tibet, which I didn't expect to happen. Like that was never on my plans. And it just so happened that like the company I work for was running a trip there and I had the opportunity to go. And so I ended up going. And it totally, yeah, it was one of those things that when I was a kid, I was like, I really want to go to Tibet. And then I just kind of forgot about it. And then I had the chance to go and like, you know, see the monasteries, see Potala Palace, like see Everest from a distance, but see Everest nonetheless. And it was just like so mind blowing. And I wish I could think of a funny story off the top of my head, but honestly, like that was like one of the biggest highlights, I think probably there's a lot of highlights over the last few years, which you'll find when you design a life that you really want to be living. Pretty much every experience is a highlight in some way, but that's definitely a big one of mine.
Yeah, I can only imagine Tibet being a very awe-inspiring
Yeah.
experience. And that's
And
the
bizarre because it's also like ruled by the Chinese. So it's actually
right.
Chinese territory, which was a trip. We actually ended up, you have to go in as a group, and we ended up losing you have to come in with like a certificate that authorizes you being there. And one of our group went on a different flight than us on the way out and got detained in China for like a week because you're supposed to enter and leave as a group. And of course we didn't realize that. And so we had different flights booked back, and she had another connecting flight through China, and then they wouldn't let her leave China because she had separated from us. And so she had an amazing experience then in China apparently, but yeah, we left one of our group members there, which was not the best experience for her, but she did end up turning it around, which was cool.
Wow. Any particular vendors or equipment or backpacks or any vendor, anything you've noticed? You've mentioned Airbnb, obviously that's a great resource. Anything else from a like what we need? And also tips on like what not to bring with you if you're traveling.
Yeah. So interestingly, I did start with a backpack, and I started with an 18-liter backpack, which was a terrible, terrible idea. So like, if you are going to go the backpacking route, pick a backpack and then stuff it full of things and carry it around your house or go on a hike and decide how much you hate it. I ended up transitioning to a wheeled suitcase because I was like, why would I carry it on my back when I could just pull it around? And because I was in Europe and it was like trains or planes, that was fine because really like then I could drag it around. So yeah, you probably need a lot less than you think you need. So try to pack light and be smart about it. And if you want to bring gifts and stuff, or you want to do that kind of thing, ship them whatever country you're in. Don't try and carry them around with you because if you're doing long-term traveling. But yeah, so I actually went with a roller suitcase and I would never go back. So figure out what works for you depending on where you're going. If you're going to Southeast Asia, a backpack or a duffel bag is probably better just because of like, you're going to be hauling it in and out of stuff a lot. And if you are going to be working on the road, get a laptop stand. Do not do this whole like just traveling with a laptop thing. Your spine is not going to be happy with you. So get a laptop stand. I have the Roost laptop stand, Roost. I think they did a Kickstarter campaign and now they sell them online. I think it's the best one because it like collapses down really easily, but there's loads of more inexpensive ones. Like I think this is quite a high price tag for what it is. So yeah, inexpensive ones. Get a Bluetooth mouse and a Bluetooth keyboard so that you can just like pack it all in a little laptop bag, have your keyboard and your mouse, and then it's like a desktop setup. Like, I'm sitting on it now and it's at my eye height and it's just so much better. So yeah, I recommend that. If you either have a phone that has a good camera or get yourself a camera, but if you have a phone that has a good camera and you're not a photographer, don't buy a camera. Like I bought one and I never used it because my phone was fine. So those are just some technology hacks. Get yourself a universal adapter because you're going to need it, and pack all your electronics separately somehow, whether that is like in a pouch that you can pull out really easily or whatever. Because if you're going through airports, you're going to have to unpack your bag, and you don't want to be that guy in the security line who's like taking forever to unpack their bags. We all look at them and we hate them, so don't be that guy. And get a reusable water bottle. And that's probably my last tip. That's like, I guess, like stuff in terms of like places. Hostel World is a really good one for hostels. It's like the conglomerate of all hostels basically that are worth their anything. So hostelworld.com is really great for hostels. Airbnb obviously is great. I do think Airbnb we're going to see some shifts in that in the next few years. I don't think it's going to be as easy as it was when I was traveling. It'll probably still be around, but there are now other companies and stuff popping up that are local for short-term stays. So just give it a quick Google before you get to wherever you're going. And try to book in advance. I would say like 2 weeks plus in advance is really awesome. You'll have a lot more options. Once you get down to like 1 week, you're really pushing it. And yeah, just join local, like use internet. It's there for you, right? Like we are more connected than we ever have been in the past. And you can be a part of any community. Like if you like board games, there's probably a board game community in the area you're going to. Like I say that because Dominic really likes board games, and we have pretty much gone to a board game cafe in every country we've gone to and met all these cool people as a result. If you like accounting, I don't know, if you're into cats, like whatever. If you are into animals, trusted trusted house sitters, animals or not. Trusted house sitters is awesome. There might also be a trusted pet sitters, but if you just Google trusted house sitters, they have an official site and they basically vet you and check that you're cool. But then if you decide to go somewhere, or you have loose travel plans and you think maybe you could go somewhere, people are always looking for people to house sit their house or take care of their pets while they're gone. And then you get a free stay. I know someone who traveled the world doing that and they didn't pay anything for accommodation. And that is so clever. Like, it's so smart. I never did that, but I probably will in the future. So yeah, definitely. There's lots of smart ways to do things. Do not be turned off by things that you perceive to be issues that might not even be issues, and talk to people that have done it, because pretty much all of us are friendly. That might be a massive overgeneralization. I'm friendly. I know a lot of digital nomads and people that travel full time that are friendly. Definitely reach out, join the communities, like ask questions. Everyone's down to help, you know, you're not kind of in this alone in any case.
So, well, in closing, I have two more questions for you, but I just want to echo what you just said. You know, some of the nicest people and most interesting people. And if you're considering doing this, you probably have some things in common, at the very least, a love for travel or adventure or culture with the people that you're going to meet. And my wife and I, on our honeymoon, we went to Peru for 3 weeks, South America, and we traveled all around. We only planned the first 2 days, and everything else was just like whatever we felt, we would just do it. And we stayed at hostels, like you had mentioned. Even on our honeymoon, we stayed at, not all the time, but we stayed at hostels, and they were amazing.
Yes.
We found this hostel that was basically this like really famous artist out of Lima, Peru, who has 2 different houses, one in Cusco and one in Lima. And we stayed right on the ocean in his basically like mansion with all of his, and this was a hostel. Okay.
That's amazing.
And then another amazing one out in Cusco. So like, don't be afraid of hostels. They're like 3 and 4 star hotels in some cases, but way more character.
So much more character. And a lot of hostels have like cool socializing areas. Like if you stay at a hotel or an Airbnb, you're kind of like on your own. But hostels have like, their whole purpose is to have travelers meet each other. So for sure, an awesome experience.
And the 2 of the coolest people we ever met on any of our travels were people just like you that were traveling. They had been traveling for 3 years. Now they were teaching English and teaching different languages. And we met them in Peru as well. Side note, real quick question. Do you speak more than 1 language? If so, how many? I'm just curious. I know people want to know. I
speak quite a few very badly. The only one I'm fluent in right now is English. I'm currently learning Portuguese. I speak very basic, rudimentary Spanish. I did study French for a long time and I can speak that basically. So how many are we at? We're at English, Portuguese, Spanish, French. I speak rudimentary Swahili because I had a boyfriend in high school and then we traveled to Zanzibar together. And so I speak some Swahili. I speak Indonesian conversationally, very basic just because of growing up there. And I think that's it. So 5 languages, but really only 1 language, if we're honest. Like the other 4 are just very, very basic.
But it came in handy, I would imagine.
Oh, for sure. I mean, ultimately, anywhere you go, I always recommend like learn the basic phrases because people will be appreciative of it. And even if they then chuckle, a lot of countries, like they do speak English really well. And so people will like in Portugal, like I will go out and I'll say a few words in Portuguese and then they'll be like, do you actually speak Portuguese? And I'll be like, no. And then their English is better than mine is. So, you know, they'll transition into English and it's fine. And in countries where they don't speak English and you try at, you know, they'll chuckle and there's like a lot more goodwill when they know that you're making an effort, you know? So I do always recommend to like pick up a few phrases wherever you're going, even if you're really bad at them.
Eu falo pouco de português.
Yeah. There you go. That's like the extent of my Portuguese too.
I was in Brazil for quite a while in grad school.
I would love to be learning Brazilian Portuguese. The pronunciation is so much easier to me than like Portuguese in Portugal is all like sh and like.
It's very, very guttural, if you will. Yeah, I agree. I studied culture in grad school and the cultural adjustment process. So it's so vital when you're traveling to just make the effort because it shows respect and it immediately creates rapport. And, you know, some people might be like, oh, you don't speak my language, right? But I just totally tried to make a French accent, which is totally terrible. And no offense to anyone who's French. I'm French. And Paris
no, are you kidding me? The one place where I've been like really shot down. Yeah.
Paris?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I had such an amazing experience recently there. So it didn't actually happen to me, but it did happen to my wife a long time ago. So no matter where you're at, you're going to have those one or two people, but the majority of people are going to really open their arms to and want to help you, show some effort. So great advice there. Any last bit of advice that you would give to people that are considering this lifestyle of travel? What would you give for advice? And then let's go into what you want to,
for sure. So final advice is, I guess, a question to them, which is if not now, then when, right? Just figure it out and do it. You're gonna thank yourself in the future, but if you don't even take steps forward to doing it, you're going to be living the same life in a few more years and probably be kicking yourself for it. And yes, we are currently in a global pandemic. I don't know when this episode's coming out. We may be more out the other side by then, we hope. But there are still smart and considerate and conscientious ways to see the world if that is something you want to do. And just be conscious in the way that you're doing that. And, there's no reason that you can't still be moving about and living overseas or living in a van or doing whatever kind of lifestyle you want to do. Just whatever it is that you want to do, get clear on it and make it happen, because you're going to thank yourself.
I love that advice, Kathleen. And you actually reminded me of the last question I forgot to ask you around COVID.
Yeah.
With that happening, I know some people are choosing not to travel. Is it possible to still travel? You just went to Greece, right? What would be your one bit of advice there, and can it happen right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think with anything, there are always ways to find solutions. I do think particularly in the US, you've got a pretty major problem, which is that most of the world has blocked you out. I say most of the world though, right? There are still some countries that are willing to take US travelers. So take a look at those, and maybe it's not a place that you originally thought you would go, but it might end up being a really interesting experience. And I think, a lot of places now have quarantine. For me, that's not a problem because I work on the computer. So I'm I'll stay in a house for 2 weeks and then, come out the other side knowing I'm healthy. That's fine. And I travel with a partner, so it doesn't feel as isolating. So I know if you're traveling alone, that's probably a bit more of a hindrance. But, if you're willing to take it slow, not try and do too much all at one time, and to follow the local laws, then there's no reason you can't still travel. And I do think that a lot of people who have been traveling for a while are deciding to settle down, just because it's people that have been traveling for a while are used to how things were, right? So in any case, we're trying to create some kind of normalcy in our lives, myself being one of those people, and settling down for a bit is what makes most sense to me right now. But you bet as soon as any of those borders are opening, I'm going to be doing weekend trips, because when you're in Europe, everything's so close. But actually getting to Greece was very easy. They COVID tested us at the airport and then never sent us any results and didn't keep track of us. So we kind of just island hopped after that, and left the mainland, which was fine. And all of us were healthy and wearing masks. So it was all good. So I think, the future of travel has changed, but it hasn't stopped. There are still industries and people, and actually flights and accommodation are now cheaper than they've been in a long time. So there are definitely lots of options.
Were there Airbnb restrictions at all, or did most people allow travelers from outside?
So it depends on the local laws. Like here it was all if you're from Europe or you've not been to America recently, then you're fine. And they all were they have more rigorous cleaning that's happening. So there's higher cleaning costs. But actually people wanted the guests so badly that the cleaning costs were higher, but the accommodation costs were lower. So actually it was very reasonable to get accommodation. Europe has opened for travel now, so it's getting busier here already. Lisbon now is busier than it was. We were here in 2 months ago, and it was dead quiet. Just before we went to Greece, we were here and it was silent. And now there's crowds again because Europe has opened a bit more. But definitely still lots of options for travel.
Well, Kathleen, you've inspired me, and you've inspired me in a lot of ways. And one of those ways is to come to Lisbon. At some point, I've researched it already after initially connecting with you online, and it seems like just an amazing place. And you're right, it was nowhere on my radar whatsoever. Right. And that's the beauty of travel. You learn about all these different places that you never would ever see if you don't just get out there and learn and connect with other people. So tell us about how we can support you in closing. And I just want to thank you so much for being a guest and sharing all of your knowledge today in your journey.
Thank you, Clinton. It's been such a pleasure. I'm excited to have you on the Ikigaia podcast, which is the first way people can support if they've enjoyed any of this conversation. This is very similar to the conversations that I'm having with different people over on the Ikigaia podcast, talking to people on purpose. So come and check that out. You can find it Ikigaia on any of your podcast players, or ikigaia.co, which is the website for it, where you'll find all the show notes. The other way that you can support is definitely to join my online community of purposeful remote workers, or access any of my freebie content. So you can find that over at kathleenhamilton.me. And those are kind of the two key places that I hang out and that I am. So all of my links are on my website. You can find them super easily. But I hope that anyone who is looking for advice or is in a job looking to transition into remote work, come and find me. I have like free call links on my website. I would love to support you in transitioning to actually creating the life that you really want to create, as well with the freedom and the earnings that you want. So those are my key areas.
Love it. Thank you so much again, Kathleen. If you are somebody that wants to travel, wants to transition, Kathleen is an expert. She's been doing this virtually her whole life, really. Her family's unique global nature, but really professionally in the last 3 years. So she has so much knowledge. You've given us so many knowledge bombs today. I so appreciate you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Clinton. I look forward to seeing you in Lisbon.